Right. Well, on that basis, we're gonna make a start. I'm just gonna cover off what we are going to be covering on today's webinar. So, and we generally feel really excited about the webinar that we've got planned today. Obviously, we couldn't do it last week. I think with the shorter week, it was quite difficult for us to plan it properly, and we didn't want to rush it. So we decided to kind of give it a break and really focus on this week's episode. So, what we have today on the agenda, a little bit of a different kind of start for us, and that we're going to be talking about cold calling anxieties. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about some of the tips and tactics that we can use in cold calling, and we intend to keep on providing those. But want to talk a little bit about the things that maybe the mental blocks that we have that prevents us from picking the phone up in the first place. We've got some pictures that have been sent in from the audience, elevated pictures that we are looking forward to breaking down. They seem to become quite a popular feature of the webinars so far. We've got the ever famous objection of the week, and you'll see that this week we're going to be talking about how to deal with that sticky situation when you hear that the prospect is already working with one of our competitors. God damn it. And then finally, we're going to be talking about language that wins in sales calls, the specific words and phrases and the psychology of those, stuff that you can start to use to influence better outcomes in your conversations. And we also have a special guest, as I mentioned, and we're really excited to bring our special guest on, which will be happening soon. But before we get there, we're going to start by talking about a little thing called call reluctance. And call reluctance has become almost the official name of in sales of ultimately what is classified as anxieties and fears of picking the phone up. So before I kind of open this up to the boys, I just want to ask a question to the audience. I want you to just put in the chat box, just type in the word yes if you have ever faced nervousness or anxieties about picking the phone up and making cold calls. I just want to hear from everybody in the audience just by putting the word yes if you have ever suffered from that.
Can we see if there's anybody who hasn't?
Yeah, if you haven't, put no. So we've got
also basically asking if there's any liars in the chat.
We've got lots of yeses flooding in. Haven't seen one no just yet.
No, everyone's telling the truth. Everyone's telling the truth.
That is good that we've got an honest bunch. Andy, the question was, have you ever suffered from call reluctance, call anxieties, call nervousness, stuff that's prevented you from picking the phone up? Andy has given a resolute answer there. So,
go on, Andy.
Stu, I'm gonna hand over to you, and I want you to just tell me what have been your personal experiences with call reluctance in your sales career. Can you share some of your personal story there?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm with Andy. Like, I definitely have and still do. Even now, I've been cold calling and helping coach people to cold call for probably 15 years or so now. And there's still occasions where I have that, fear of what might happen or that fear of picking up the phone. So it's been with me throughout my career. It's definitely getting easier as I've getting better at it and done more of it, but it's never completely escaped me. What I do to myself and what I've done for a number of years now, and a tip that works really well for me to try and get over it, is I just think through, what's the worst that can happen, Stu? I almost think to myself, come on, like, you're a grown man, you're making a phone call, get on with it. It's a telephone call. You're not going to die. I always put myself in somebody else's role, and I think you could be in the front line fighting in a war. You could be getting shot. You're picking up the phone, Stu, deal with it. And that's kind of the little prep talk that I have with myself, and it's almost like suck it up and get on with it. And the worst thing about a cold call is the fear of a cold call. I've never had a cold call that's as bad as the actual fear. I've been told to piss off. I've been told, everything you can imagine. It doesn't bother us. And the fear is worse than the actual event can ever be.
It's weird because maybe to talk about my personal anxieties about this when I was starting in the role. And I actually think a lot of the reasons that I had call reluctance was actually just a lack of competence. I just didn't really know what to do in a cold call. So I think naturally anything in life, if you're better at doing something, you have more confidence, you have less anxieties about doing it. But I had some like weird mental blocks that I think ultimately it was when I started learning that other people felt the same. Like I'd see that someone would have the job title director and I would be so much more reticent to call that person versus the person that had manager next to their title. This, they're essentially a human being, but because they have this, as apparently more senior job title, I'd actually make a conscious effort not to call that person back in the day. I used to sit in a really quiet office, my first sales job, with like maybe 6 other people, and it was really quiet, especially if there was no like radio or background noise. And it honestly felt like when I picked the phone up, everybody in that room was just suddenly would stop what they're doing and just be almost listening to what Rich is doing on his calls.
Did you ever not ring somebody based on the picture, Rich?
You what? Sorry?
Did you ever not ring somebody based on the picture? And think,
oh yeah,
they look like a ball break. I'm not ringing them. Like
if I saw LinkedIn profile pic, a stern-looking face, big suit on, I'd be like, there is not a chance I am going to call him. No way. And it was just these weird things that you kind of like. Ultimately, they're just mental blocks. That's all they are, but they're understandable. And I think, hopefully, it'd be great if people can put in the chat other examples of weird little things that have kind of prevented them from making calls. Mark, what's your personal experiences here?
Yeah, so I noticed John Cunningham has specifically asked if I've suffered with this. I'm not too sure who John is, but all right, mate. Yes, no, I've definitely suffered with it. I don't know about you two. I didn't really have call reluctance in the first year or so of my career. I was quite eager, I was quite keen. I don't think I took it too seriously, like in terms of like my career maybe. But then over like the second and third and fourth year, it definitely, I started to develop these like self-limiting beliefs that, and what you said, Rich, just so aware that everyone was listening to me, paying attention to me. And then I remember having this conversation with my dad, and my dad just went like, do you really think people give a shit what you're doing? Like, no one is sat in that office thinking, Mark's on the phone, let's have a little listen. Like, everyone's busy. And I think that's the whole point of call reluctance, fear of anxiety, is that when you have it, it's because you're thinking about yourself. You're thinking about, are you going to muck up? Are you going to make a mistake? Are you going to look stupid? Because it's the unknown. When you pick up the phone, within 2 seconds, you've got to work out, is this person going to be all right having a conversation with you? Are they having a good day? Are they a chatterbox? Do they want you to get straight to the point? But reality is, you've just got to distance yourself from the outcome. I think I said this a couple of webinars ago. You got to just not care what happens, because you're only interested in talking to people that you can help. If you can't help them, just put the phone down and move on. But yeah, I definitely have experienced this in a certain point of my career when I felt like everyone was really invested in listening to me when no one was. I was really worried about the outcome when no one else was. And I still get it now, but just not as often. And I'm the sucker for the picture. When I see someone's LinkedIn photo, it's a particular type as well. Like, it's a particular type of photo that just gives it all a oh god. If they refer to themselves in the third person, I think this is a really super serious person. But I'd say the hardest call to make is the first call every day. That's the hardest one to make. As soon as you make the first one, it's all good. And you know what? I used to get in just a little bit earlier and make that first call before most people were in. I'll still do that now. Just get the first call out of the way.
Yeah, I think what's key here as well is that we do provide some recommendations and solutions on how to actually deal with this. I think there's an acknowledgement across us that everybody suffers from this one way or another, and it is just mental blocks. It's kind of weird. It's like we never have anxiety about ringing the stranger in the call center to query our phone bill, but when we call them to see if we can help somebody else from a cold call, suddenly it's a totally different dynamic. But I think some of the things that have really helped, so first of all is pair up with somebody else. I think to kind of remove that anxiety about people listening in, get somebody else in the company, someone that you work with, get them to commit to calling at the same time as you are. And even doing this, like we've been doing this in a remote setting. We're doing this on Zoom, where you can actually see the other person on the in your team just doing it, and you kind of feel like you're both in the same boat together. It creates that buzz. And put some music on, some background noise. It's amazing just how that background noise can just take the edge off, just feeling like you're just speaking in a kind of a chamber. Find really really useful. And we actually, one thing that we've done, we used to do at Refract, is we have this slogan called "We Move On," And it was just a phrase that if you came off a call that went dreadfully wrong, where the person hung up on you, where the person didn't want to talk to you, we just used to say out loud, we move on. And it's just that kind of like resolute phrase of like, it's done, it doesn't matter, I'm going to find the next person. And the other thing is just not dwelling on the call too much. Like you can sit there and you can agonize over it, and you've just finished a call and maybe the call didn't go too well. The worst thing you can do is sit there for 15, 20 minutes just pontificating over the next call. Just make the next conversation. The more, and it's like anything, when it becomes repetition, you just it becomes more normalized. Gents, I don't know if you've got any other sort of things that you feel have worked well for you.
I've got a good tip that works really well for me, and it always has done. And it kind of anything in sales, or really anything I'm doing in life, I try to take and not worry about the things I can't control. So if I'm going to do a power hour or a session where I want to do cold calling, I'll kind of make an agreement with myself, right, Stu, regardless, you're going to ring these 20 people in this next hour. There's your list. There's your 20 people. Rattle through them. What's going to happen? Who knows? Some might be interested. Some might not. Who cares? I'm going to set myself that target. I'll ring 20 people. Whatever happens, happens. But I know I can keep my side of that bargain, and I'll make those calls. And more often than not, it's successful. But I'm not banking on it. I'm not hoping on it. I'm not even thinking about the outcome. I'm just saying, right, Stu, there's your deal. Next hour, then you can have a cup of coffee or something. Give yourself a little bit of an incentive at the end. Ring these 20 people. Then you can have your coffee and see what happens. The truth of cold calling is, though, like everybody's the same. We all hate it, but it's one of those difficult things that once you do it and you have a good one, you're flying.
Yeah.
Like if you make a good cold call, you get somebody, you get an opportunity on your pipeline, chances are your next phone call is more likely than not going to be another opportunity, because you bounce from one successful call to the next. Don't know how that happens, and it probably just is that confidence thing. I'm not trying to say there's some kind of like forces involved making that happen, but for me, just not worrying about the outcome, not worrying about the things outside your control, and just making deals with yourself and sticking to yourself, sticking to what you say makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I know we want to move on from this part, boys, but I'd add to that the key things that I think we said there as well is mob mentality, getting everyone to do it at the same time, and just having a laugh. Like we move on is definitely something we say, or we say that you've burnt a lead. Like we say, like Stu started more fires than Billy Joel. He has a mistake, and we just go, "Oh, you've burnt that lead, have you, Stu?" And Stu will be like, "Yep, burnt it, gone," and we just laugh about it. And I think that the other thing though is that right now, if you are worried about making cold calls, this is the perfect time. You're at home, no one else is around. Like, just use this time to absolutely perfect your calls and start recording them yourself and listening back to them. And then when you're back in the office and back with everyone else, you'll be such in a better place for it.
And here's maybe the cold, hard reality, and the thing that's difficult to face, but is the reality, is that all those things that are stopping you from doing it, that's giving you anxieties, they're all mental blocks. And the longer you have those mental blocks, the more you're going to have a blockade to your success. I should put that in a book or something. But anyway, really important thing to talk about. So I think we need to move on. But hopefully that was just a useful thing for us to talk out loud, and hopefully make everyone aware that they're in the same boat as many other people in that situation. So what we're going to do now is bring on a special guest to the show. So I'm going to get Matt to invite our special guest. We've not done this before. We want to do this as a fixture, and it's a Mr. Mike Guest, who is the managing director of Sandler Training Silverstone. So whilst he's coming on.
So Rich, you're actually going to need to do this now because of the chaos at the start of this webinar. I've passed the host role over to you. So if you select Mike's name up in the top right, there should be an option for you to bring him on.
Right. Okay.
So it's spammer.
Right. So promote to panelist. Is that the right thing to do, Matt?
That is exactly the right thing to do.
So Mike,
fine colours.
Hopefully you should be getting this through. And whilst that's happening, we're going to provide your intro music.
Guest, be our guest. Put our service to the test.
Very nice. And it's Beauty and the Beast. Very nice, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me on today and to give me such a fantastic intro.
Of course. Guest by name, guest by nature. So
absolutely.
So so we're really excited to have Mike join us for this portion of the webinar. Mike, I've probably done you a disservice, but feel free to introduce who you are and kind of your brief story to why you decided to set up your own sales training company.
Well, I suppose my background is I started working for charity well, not that long ago. Quite a few years, longer than some of you have been alive, never mind selling. And then I got into healthcare. So I was a nurse for about 11 years. I got into medical sales in 2007, so just before the UK government stopped spending on healthcare. I decided that it would be a good time to jump in to a bit like I've jumped into working for myself just at the right time as well. So we got into austerity. I spent 13 years selling. So I've sold at the territory level, I've managed sales teams, and I just finished my corporate career selling internationally. Decided to join the global Sandler community, so one of 300 kind of Sandler trainers out there, and I did that because I learned a lot of things about training over 13 years. The first thing I learned was that most training in sales fails, and that's because it's a single event. It's really a motivational rah-rah speech. We call it entertainment. Where basically, it doesn't change people's behavior. It doesn't upskill people. It doesn't have a significant impact on performance. But it felt good at the time, for me.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I learned is that no one coaches. No one coaches in sales, and surprisingly few can. That was my biggest eye opener, I think, entering the the private sector. And you know how it is that the biggest order taker got promoted to sales manager. They were expected to manage sales teams without training or any relevant experience. I'm sure there's a load of the guys on the call now are nodding ruefully on that one. And as a result, what they tend to do is these guys, they focus on the wrong areas of the business. They cause a load of stress. People leave businesses, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So I decided, actually, I've enjoyed my sales career so much that I wanted to help salespeople sell and to become better sales managers. So I joined the Sandler Network, possibly at the wrong time. We'll see. And here we are. And now I'm on a webinar with you guys, which is a pleasure.
It's great to hear that. And I guess before we move on to the elevator pitch breakdowns, that's be great to have your involvement in. What we talked about core reluctance there, Mike, and how it can impact people. And you saw the amount of people in this webinar who have at some point in their career suffered from this. What's kind of your experiences of that, and how do you maybe help people kind of get over that?
Well, the first thing is, anybody that tells you that they love making cold calls is probably a liar. Or a manager who's never made cold calls. Okay, so they sit in one of those two camps. I struggle with cold calls still, and it's all mental. So what I tell myself is that I'm not emotionally invested in the outcome of the call. That's the first thing. Because it's not about the rejection is not about me as a person. It's not about me as an individual and my self-worth. It's about, the timing's wrong, the product's wrong, their business is wrong, they're just not open-minded. Whatever it is, the rejection is not about me as an individual. The rejection is about something around product timing or pricing, whatever it is. That's the first thing I keep in mind. The second thing is I am genuinely going for a no. So if I can get no's on the table quickly, basically I've retained as much of my selling time as possible for people who can say yes. And so literally I want to get, if somebody's going to be a no, I want them off the phone as quickly as possible, because this is my time, not, we always think of it as we're wasting their time, but I'm also wasting my time, and that's not good for my business.
That's a really good mentality to have. I think if everybody has that mindset that actually, and we've kind of touched upon this a little bit, but maybe not too much, is if prospects actually say no to us, that's the kind of the outcome that we want. And when you feel that it's more you're in control, then it's amazing how that you hold more of the control and you have less of the fear and the anxieties of the outcome. So I really love that kind of mentality.
Yeah, and I think Stuart said it in one of the first weeks that you hosted one of these. What outcome are you looking for? And I think I was there. I was with everybody else, and I was like, yeah, to get the next meeting. And then when actually you think about it, it's not. all I want from a call is I want to know if we can do business.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact not everybody is for me, and I'm not for everybody. So that's the objective. I mean, other things I think around are things like I'm financially independent. I don't need this business, and if I was an employee, I certainly don't need it. So I'm just trying to coach myself that this is a situation where what is the outcome? It's not really going to hurt me. Other things I put in mind are how much I'm going to make per dial. I make £7.50 a dial. Okay, that's genuinely. If I dial 100 people, I've earned over the course of the law of averages say that if I earn phone 100 people, I've just earned £7,500. So on the ratios of what I do, so I can hold it in my mind. If I pick up that phone, or if I'm reluctant to pick up the phone, how many £7.50s didn't I earn?
Mike,
if I was you, get off this webinar
and get back on that phone.
Absolutely wasting your time with us, mate.
Well, I'll put a caveat on that, and that is pre-COVID-19. That was my stats. My stats have possibly dropped a touch.
The price of oil.
Yeah, along with the price of oil and Scottish independence, relying on that. But that's a different argument. I think other things that are good are affirmations. I had a look at something. There's a guy called John Rosso. He's a bit of a legend in the Sandler world. In fact, no, he's probably the legend in the Sandler world. And he says his affirmation, he uses one, or he certainly did when he started out, was, I am the cure for, in the sales training world. He was the cure for sales cancer. And he's a minimum of a 10 times return on investment for anybody who works with him. So he has a responsibility to actually pick up the phone and tell people about what he can do for their business. And I would say that every guy that's listening and lady, girl who's listening to this, your product's the same. For somebody, it's gold dust. It's the magic solution. It's the kind of secret sauce. And if you go into a conversation with that, as you have a responsibility to share the positive outcomes of what you do. It's a very different thought to I'm interrupting someone's day and I'm kind of, I'm a bit of a pain in the neck. Yeah, so they're the kind of strategies that I use.
Brilliant. Well, there's some gold dust in what you've just said there, Mike. Thank you for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on to our elevator pitch breakdowns. We've got two. We've got time, I think, to play two today. Before we do that, again, just Mike, want to talk to you you're from the Sandler training world, and you guys have a very specific terminology for how you would describe the elevated pitch. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that and that structure, and then we'll dive into playing some real pitches.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it the 30-second commercial because it's something that you can deploy anywhere. I deploy it in network meetings, cold calls. I deploy it at the start of a business meeting if people aren't 100% certain why I'm there. Yeah, and so we basically look at a structure where, after the pattern interrupt, again, we talked about, you guys went through that in the first week in a cold call context. Basically, what I want to do is I want to let the prospect know as quickly as possible what potential issues I solve that are directly relative to their business. And then I want to ask them and get a hook as to whether or not any of the things that I've mentioned are of interest to them in terms of getting them solved.
Yeah, and that's a very kind of similar approach to how we've been kind of leading with the specific problems that we solve, quickly figuring out if they're if they're relevant or interesting. Because I think what that does, it very quickly, again, coming back to your point before, Mike, about finding the nose. If you can't solve, if you're speaking with someone where those problems aren't relevant to you, can't solve them, then why are we even talking? Why are we wasting time? And I really like that, how both of those things just kind of plug together that you just shared. Okay, brilliant. What we're going to do then, we're going to play two elevator pitches. And then after each one, so I want the audience to just put in the chat their thoughts and comments on the pitches, so we can make sure that we hear these. And then I'm going to chuck the floor to the guys to give them their feedback. So first of all, we're going to start with Adam Dance. Adam is from a company called IdeaGen. They're a company based in Nottingham, and they're a software company. funny story here. I've got a deal that's been on the edge with Idea Gen for a long time. So hopefully we give Adam lots of good praise, and maybe this. But anyway, so here's Adam's elevator pitch. Let's play it out, and then again, audience in the comments, leave your thoughts, feedback. Let's make sure that we lead it with it being positive, and then we'll then open it up the floor.
Well, typically when I'm speaking with other HR leaders, they're sharing a key frustration. They don't have a system in place currently to educate their employees on how to keep themselves healthy, happy, productive working from home. And because of the strict measures put in place by the government, a large amount of employees, myself included, I'm sure you're in the same boat, we've had to just completely uproot our day-to-day environment and activities. But many companies are now realizing that their employees now have the time to skill up on that agile working using like e-learning software work, right?
Okay, so there's Adam from Idea Gen's pitch. So we've got Andy says clear, concise, well articulated. You should inject some pep into the pitch. I think is maybe just relating to just some of the maybe enthusiasm in there. Mike, why don't you come in first here and talk a little bit about what your thoughts are with what Adam did well, what Adam maybe could improve, and some takeaways for him.
Right. Well, I thought it started well because he went in with an emotional pull for the kind of frustration thing, and obviously people tend to buy emotionally and they justify stuff intellectually. So that's where we wanted to be. Unfortunately, Adam, I still don't know what you sell, and that was quite a long pitch. So my advice would be keep it with that emotional grain, and basically give me. I'd like to hear as the HR manager. Maybe another 2 things that you solve in a single sentence that I can relate to in terms of some form of business pain.
One thing you mentioned there might, I think, be useful to expand upon is people, I think you said they make decisions emotionally, they make, if you can repeat what you just said there and expand upon what you mean by that.
There's basically, when we look at sales and selling, we buy for emotional reasons. We might not like to admit that, and we dress up a purchase decision, especially in a professional arena, intellectually. So why it's good for the business, why it's good for revenue, etc. But normally the hook is something emotional and personal to us. So, for example, if I'm selling stuff to a sales director, I'm selling sales training to a sales director. The emotional hook is normally stuff like his job's on the line because his sales team is incredibly ineffective. And he's seriously worried about delivering on promises that he's made. So he's not interested in what I do, really. He's interested in resolving his pain, which is having a poorly trained sales team. And that tends to be how we buy. We just dress everything up in emotional language that sounds much more respectable and acceptable in public life. But really, if we can get to the emotion of the matter, then we tend to get more close to a potential sale.
Perfect. Stu, I don't know if you want to touch upon any thoughts for Adam on this pitch.
Yeah, not a great deal to add to that, to be fair. I would agree, typically when he started with HR leaders are frustrated, but then I don't think the problem's big enough that he leads with. It's not going to keep the HR manager up at night, that the team, I'm trying to look back at my notes, they're really challenging to keep them healthy and things in this arena. He lost me a little bit with that, if I'm honest. Am I a HR manager who's losing sleep because my team are not healthy in this current climate? I don't know. I'm not a HR manager, but I'm guessing they're not. What is the real challenge that you solve? I think you need to dive a bit deeper into that. Is it the fact that staff are leaving and it costs them a fortune to train them up and then they leave? Is it that they have to get new staff in all the time, which again costs a fortune in recruitment because they're not keeping people happy and healthy, and how you can relate to it? I think there's just a deeper level that you need to go into with the pain that you lead with, something that really, they are losing sleep. We try to use that internally. Think of the pains that keep people up at night that they're thinking of. And once you can find that pain that your product solves, that's when you're onto a winner.
I think, Adam, you were sort of halfway there for me. I think you said, looking for things to keep staff happy and productive. Maybe just tweaking that to saying, what is the what is the opposite of that? Like, what is the problem if people aren't happy and productive? What does that lead to? And that's like, lost in, they're not as efficient. That's, they're not selling as much. They're not, there's a big overhead of the business. It's, these are the kind of the think of it as not things that make people happy. It's things that keep this the problems that they face, and it can be just a little bit of a nuance switch there that might kind of get you more of an impactful opening statement. But again, really, I think well articulated and really good job and fair play for sending that in. Right, we're going to move on to Cam. Cam is works for a company called Visualsoft, and so we're going to play Cam's response, and then again, any thoughts from the audience, please put them into the chat, and then I'll open this up to Mike and Mark. Okay, so here we go. Cam.
Well, that's why I wanted to get in touch. We have lots of clients in the same space as you, and that means we have a lot of insight and data that we can anonymize, but we could apply to maybe what you're trying to do. My name's Cam, by the way. I'm one of the senior consultants at Visualsoft. Visualsoft have been doing this a long time, over 20 years, and we've learned lots of different things to allow us to help businesses like you grow online. In fact, we created a model built for certain brands who are ambitious enough to want to really get some great results. It's called Shared Success. It actually works on a percentage share, so we have a vested interest, and ultimately we get paid on results. Would you like to hear more?
Okay, so that was Cam Wood from Visualsoft. Mike, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, that was a nice, confident delivery, conversational. Couple of things that I'm always a little bit wary of until I know a business would be revealing that I'm working with competition. There can be a funny thing, so that can come down in one or two areas. One, they love it because, again, I think this obviously gentleman Cam's selling reusable customer information, which is always good. But the problem is maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want a different database of unique customers that have not been tapped. So leading with it until I know how somebody sits around that is that's a caution for me. Second part, Cam, it became a little bit about you, if I'm honest. And in a cold call, if I was on the receiving end of that, I am thinking a little bit like, so what? Unfortunately, because like everybody, again, the unfortunate reality is I don't care about what you and what you do. I care about what you're going to do for me and the problems that you're going to solve for me. So I think I would restructure slightly. Again, focus on the pains. There's obviously some rich stuff there about what you're solving and the solution you've got. I'd more lead. I'd want to hear a little bit more about what are these pain points that the companies that you're selling your system to. What's the commonalities? What pain do you remove? What opportunities do you open up with the system? And then when I'm actually going to have my first call with them, that's when I'm going to come up with the kind of the interesting sort of goodies about how it works.
Yeah, I think that's really fair feedback, Mike. I think one thing that I know Visualsoft do have is a really strong brand and name in the market, which is, I think, is great to promote that, but promote that in the sense of how you've helped specific similar companies, for example, to the one that you're targeting. Mark, any additional thoughts there for Cam above and beyond what Mike shared?
Yeah, so I agree with what Mike said in a lot of ways. It felt to me like an elevator pitch of two halves. I thought the first half was quite strong. I personally, so Mike, I know Visualsoft quite well. As Rich says, they've got a great brand in the e-commerce space. They're well known. I think the fact that they work with competitive organizations in this case helps, because what they're saying is, look, as an example, let's say airlines. We work with loads of different airlines. We know what works best to drive results for their websites, and we can apply that to your website. So I think in this case, that works well. I think the fact that the second half just trailed into more about Cameron, more about the business, and I think that come a little bit early. I think the key part though is, Cameron said it, we want to help you with what you're trying to do. But what is it? That for me is the bit where you need to really crank it. What is it they're trying to do, and how are you going to help them do that? That's the bit that was missing. But other than that, I thought, like you say, it was really confident, really conversational. You can imagine that you'd give them a little bit more time, particularly if it was maybe a face-to-face, an exhibition stand, as an example. But yeah.
The one phrase I took from it is like, visual soft can help you grow online. Again, it kind of sings back to Adam's thing. Is that, to me, sounds too sort of nicey-nicey. I think the problem would be visual soft helps companies who've struggled to grow revenues quicker online. And not just nuance of just flipping it. You're saying the same thing ultimately, but you're just bringing it back to the things that the ultimate. Everybody wants to grow. Everybody obviously wants to grow their business online, but people are much more motivated when they're frustrated at how it hasn't happened as quick as they want to, or that they're not achieving the revenue goals as quick as they want to. And it's just those ways that you can switch it to just being more problem focused. Awesome. So that leaves elevator pitch. We're gonna
just say at this point, Rich. Though, if anyone here that's listening wants to take part in our elevator pitch, leave your name below. A link to your LinkedIn profile will be really helpful. Matt will grab them, and then you can take part in the pitch of the week.
Yeah, put the word pitch in before. So put pitch, then your LinkedIn profile and your name, and we'll make sure that we get in touch.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to move on to everybody's favourite part of the show.
Objection of the week.
I know Mike is a fully fledged platinum member of the Objection of the Week fan club, so that's one of the reasons we've got him on the show this week.
Hashtag. I use the hashtag. I do.
So, okay, and I'm really looking forward to this breakdown of this Objection of the Week today, because we're going to be talking about a challenge that I think probably some of us face more than others, depending on what kind of market that you sell to. But it's that moment that we get our ideal customer profiles on the phone, or even in a response to an email, and they tell us, sorry, but I'm working with one of your competitors, and it's a direct competitor. It's not that you compete with. So I just want people to start putting in the chat. Tell us, how do you feel when you've got that ideal customer has picked up the phone, they've answered it, they've given you permission to speak, and they then tell you that they work with one of your competitors? How does that make you feel? Just type in that what you feel in that specific moment. Opportunity, gutted, deflated. Let's just know that could be a fit. Good, because they've bought into what they're selling. Interested. It's tough to overcome. It is exciting. So more positivity in here. I mean, I'm always gutted when I ring someone and they're working with a competitor. I'm like, oh no, not again. Super excited because we're a tenth of the price. Fair enough. They're already sold on the idea. So interesting perspectives. Very good starting point. Right. So Mike, maybe you want to kick us off here, and just by, I guess, telling you about your approach, Sandler's approach of overall what is the process and the tactics when you get hit with this objection.
The first thing to keep in mind is the guys who said have the opportunity mindset are exactly right. Okay, somebody has done the hard work of getting a similar solution into that business, especially if you're in a tough market where it's kind of new, different fringe technology. So they're already part sold. The next thing is it's a statement, and what does it mean? Okay, most salespeople, they go straight into why you're better. All right, because that's the instant sales response, is why I'm a better solution. But we don't even know what the statement means. So there's kind of, in my head, there tends to be 3 or 4 reasons why the person's telling you this. The most common one is just to get you off the phone. But realistically, underneath, they're either totally happy with their provider, they're totally unhappy with the provider, they're messing with your head just to see what you're going to say, or they're on the fence, and therefore they're open for a conversation. So how do I actually answer it? Basically, there's a couple of ways in. So the first thing is, the first thing is mental. You've got to keep your tonality the same as it was. So Cam, we had a great tonality. He had a great, conversational presence. You guys shared, I think, is it week 1 or week 2? Somebody, I think, I wasn't sure if it was your team or just somebody that you work with. And you could feel he'd got a pushback, and you could, the air had literally been punched out of him. And it was like went from,
it happens to him all the time.
But you could hear the tonality change. Whatever the trigger was, it went from being kind of like, hi, I'm Mike Guest, to, the customer's going to pick on that instantly. So if you're not remaining confident and buoyant about, the potential for this conversation, they're going to pick up on that, and your phone call's over. As soon as that you lose that kind of momentum and your positivity, your presence, that's it. It's game over. So that's would be my first kind of key message is maintain the tonality. This is just something, the start of a conversation. Mm-hmm. I think that what I'm going to respond with instantly is who is it? Who are they? Or who's that? I'm not going to ask that nicely, because that's going to make me sound salesy, like a sales guy. And again, they want to get me off the phone. So I'm just going to say, oh, who's that? That's going to allow me to identify the company. I mean, you might be in a industry where there's only the 2 providers, so you're going to know. But people like me, there's half a dozen people locally selling my services. So I want to know who they are, because I've done my competitor analysis and I know what their weaknesses are. So I want to get it on the table, who you're working with, because that's triggering in my head, right, I know where my competitive positioning is against that, even if you quite like them. So right, in my head, I've got 2 options from that position. We discussed one yesterday. I'm going to hit you with a slightly tangential one today, which is I'm going to ask them, why do you like working with them? All right, that sounds a bit weird. So they're going to tell me some great stuff about this person they're working with, and that sounds really counterintuitive. But if I blow this call, they're going to give me some positives, so some more competitor intelligence that I can take away and try and work with. But the long and the short of it is, can I share a very brief, quick, true story on this? So my coach, basically, we were discussing this subject this morning, actually, and she said, well, she uses that regularly, and she taught that in class to somebody. Young lady leaves the class with this in her head, that she's going to ask them, that's great. What will you tell me? What do you like about about your provider? So she gets exactly this objection. She says to them, so what is it exactly you like about working with our competition? And the person on the other side of the phone said, absolutely nothing. And needless to say, that's a massive segue into, right, well, how can I do this better for you? So the problem is, in our head, we get it that because somebody's working with a competition, who knows whether they like them or not. So anyway, sorry, slight digression there, but to follow up on the fact that we're liking the competition, they've given us some stuff. It does, though, allow me, once they've given me a couple of nice positive things, I can say, right, hey, that sounds fantastic. I really, really like the fact that, you're getting such good service. Is there one thing that you can put your finger on that you would change in that relationship? And I'm not asking for, can I do it? I'm just asking them to put that on the table. And then that's my segue into, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. This is how we might address that. And is it worth a further conversation? So that's one kind of talk track on that.
Yeah. Interesting. Stu, what's your just curious around some of the Mike's obviously shared his kind of tactical approach, and this is what we want to do on these webinars, is actually share stuff that you guys can actually use and put into practice. What would you say are some of the pitfalls that you've maybe learned along the way of maybe the wrong ways of dealing with this objection?
Mike picked up on one of them. It's that when you find out and you've lost the battle immediately. That's why normally if somebody gives me an objection, I normally say, oh, awesome. And it changes things entirely, and it's not what they're expecting you to say. So if somebody says, I'm working with a competitor, my initial reply is awesome. And then I'll ask a question. Some of the pitfalls is you automatically get defensive and you start to defend your product. And like Mike said, you go into pitch mode and say the reasons why you're better. Well, we do this, we do that. And I've heard it in calls. Salespeople don't mean to do it, but they get defensive over their product. They think it's the best thing since sliced bread. They want to defend that and tell everybody the reason why they're better. But what we need to do, in my experience, is be curious and find out more. Like Mike said, that person could have just said, oh, we work with a competitor at the moment. They could be sick to the back teeth of them. They could have been the worst provided they've ever bought into the business. What you need to do is try and understand more. Something that I use quite regularly, which works quite well in this situation. If somebody says I'm with a competitor, I'll literally word for word say, oh, awesome. Tell me what you like about them and what could be better. And I ask that both in the same question, because people tend to focus on what will be better rather than what they like. And I do that. But if I just say to somebody, oh, what could be better? They think he just wants me to like bash this product and he's sent me a leading question. But when I caveat that with, oh, what do you like about them and what could be better? That seems to get a really good response. And then people do talk about things that, that they think could be improved. And then you've got the easy close from there. If we could deliver X, Y, and Z, would it be ridiculous that you would consider moving providers?
Yeah. Mark, what would you say are some of the kind of ideal outcomes in these situations when we're locked in these conversations?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, when I hear this, I think, well, I'm either going to win or lose very quickly. And that's what you want. You don't want the maybes. Like, they're the ones that kill you. So I agree with Stu. I think asking a question, I agree with Mike about asking who it is, but I want them to say no. And I think we're going to get onto this with the art of language, but I rather than get my prospect to say yes, I'm really happy, I want them to say no. So I'll ask a question, would it be fair to say then that you are 100% happy with your current provider? And to say yes is quite a hard thing to say. 100% happy, or similar. Don't always go for the percent route, but you want them to say, well, no. And that's it. The door's open now. Now you can start to open it up. But there's a few key things you've got to find out. You've got to find out, look, what contract are they in? Like, have they just signed up? Are they sometimes I've had this, they know the MD of that company really well. They've got mates rates as an example. But I think the biggest mistake we can all make, I think, is Kevin Bills in the house. I saw it. I think he commented earlier on.
Yeah.
So Kevin's the CEO of Refract, and I don't know if Kev will recall, about a year and a half ago we had a coaching session around this, because I was on a call, someone mentioned a competitor, and I got what Kev coined competitor reflux, and that's where you just all of a sudden like spewed all over them. Why we're better, the defense shields went up, and that's the real big mistake that we can make, is we go defensive, pure Jon Snow getting his big sword out while everyone's running at him. You just want to be embracing of that. You want to ask a couple of questions. Kev, I think you wrote a blog on this, or you certainly said you were going to. If you did write it, let's try and dig it out and put it in.
Matt's already to put it in the chat.
There we go.
My from your perspective, and I think what Mark's saying is key there, is that sometimes they might be delighted with their competitor, but I think what for you is the telling signal in that call where you feel there is no chance of them being open to finding out more about how you can potentially help.
If I'm going to go Mark's route, I'm going to go high barrier with 100%. You're 100% happy, and some people are going to hit you back with, yeah, I'm 100% happy. So I'm gonna try. I'm a plucky northerner, so I'm gonna try one last time. Or in all honesty, I hate to let stuff go. I do go for the no, but once I've got a conversation, once I've got them talking, I don't want to let them go. But I will say something like, so it sounds like, no matter what I say, even if I could save you the time, grow your profits, decrease your sales cycle, you still would not want to have a further conversation with me. And it's just a last ditch, and then a no's a no. But to be honest, a no's a no. I'm still going to hit them. Can you tell me if there's anybody that might be interested in what I do? So I'm still going to hit them for referral. Is my very last shot. But yeah, I'm going to give them something like that, just to try to prise that door open. And otherwise, I'm going to go and take an early bath.
We just on the topic of that, of like finding people who, just not to just waste time with people who are time wasters. We have a name for these called wine tasters that we evolved in our last company. Basically, first of all, to rhyme on time wasters, so you can call someone a wine taster and they think it's actually a compliment because they think there's some kind of connoisseur. But ultimately, wine tasting is where you're like, there's the person who kind of sniffs the wine and takes a little sip, but doesn't want to pay for the bottle. So if anyone's got any other names for these types of people, Mark, I know that you've got one of them.
Yes, I call them time thieves. They just steal your time. It does my head in. Stu, you used to sell cars, didn't you?
Did.
Classic.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, we've had Jeff's already put in tire kickers. That was great. Well, we're gonna move on. This has been great to have Mike part of us for this section of the webinar. I think he's offered some real value above and beyond what we're capable of doing. So it's great to have Mike. Mike, I don't know if you just want to before you go, just let people know kind of how best to connect in with you, and if they want to carry on a conversation.
I mean, if you're in the UK, then obviously, internationally, I'm on LinkedIn. I've rarely say no. If I get a sales pitch, I might try to critique you and get you to sign up to one of my sales programs if it's NAF. Otherwise, if international guys, I would say look for your local Sandler training office. We're everywhere. There's 300 of us across the globe providing top quality training services. So that would be my advice. But connect with me on LinkedIn. I publish loads of weird and wonderful stuff on sales.
Before you go, Mike, we just need to get the team all looking at the camera and smiling on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Done. You can use that, Matt.
And you can tell Mike's far more professional than us because he's actually put a suit jacket and shirt on rather than us slobs just in our stuff that we roll out of it. Yeah.
He's got a proper background
as well. Right. Thanks very much.
Anyway, thanks for having me on, guys. Absolute pleasure.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Right. Okay. So that was awesome. Hopefully that was great. And we're going to continue to see if we can get more special guests on moving forwards. We're going to roll into the last piece of the show today, and it's a really interesting part. And this is the bit I'm really in particular looking forward to today. Is looking at language that wins. You kind of would have seen a lot over the past few weeks how we run sales calls and how we type emails and the choice of words and phrases that we use. And we genuinely believe we can share some stuff here and some psychology around the language that wins that can just show how our specific choice of the words and phrases that we use can achieve better outcomes. And genuinely, we feel that some of the implementation of some of this phraseology can genuinely see us all achieve better results and generate more pipeline. I guess let's just jump into it. I know that we're tight for time. Stu, I know that you wanted to highlight a specific study that really is quite fascinating as far as how the nuances and change of language can achieve better outcomes. So yeah, do you want to just touch upon this?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of what we share typically is, our experience doing this day in, day out and what works for our team. But what this is real science. Like, this is backed by real research, by real doctors and people who know what they're talking about, and not just us who do it day in, day out. And it's key that language is really important in the language that you choose to use. And, from that psychological point of view, it makes a massive difference. There's a couple of key studies I want to share with you here from a book called Yes, by a guy called Dr. Robert Cialdini. It's a really good book. It's quite old. It's been around a long time. There's a number of other books, but it really resonated with me when I read it. And some of the things they share. One of these is actually, again, going to our CEO, Kev, who's on the line. He recommended this book to me, and I got a ton of value from it. One of the studies is regarding hotels. And what they were trying to accomplish is get guests to reuse their towels. For obvious reasons, it saves the environment. They're not having to, focus on washing those as often, and it saves them money, and it saves them housekeeping costs. So there's massive benefits to getting them to do that. But they were really struggling. They tried loads of different things, loads of different notes. And what they went with in the end was little notes in the hotel rooms. And they tried different versions to see what was the most successful. And these were two of the better ones. And the first one, which meant that any guest staying there was 26% more likely to reuse their towel, was this, 12 or so words? And it is, most people reuse the towels at least once during their stay. Really simple, really straightforward, but that meant 26% more people reused their towels. And what that done, if we break that down a little bit, what we're doing is we're putting people into kind of the herd mentality. Most people, you're grouping guests into that automatically. People want to conform and be part of groups. So you're trying to play on the emotional pull of that and get people to confirm. And at least once during their stay, it's almost in like, surely you can do it at least once. At least once is not too much to ask that you reuse that towel. And that, as I say, yielded a 26% result. But they didn't leave it there. They tweaked it again further, trying to find, how that language can impact it. And this one's a little bit longer. So what they went with, which was 50% increase on that, is most people who stayed in this room reuse their towels at least once during their stay. So again, they've used the most people. They've used at least once during their stay, but the difference here is who stayed in this room. That's making you part of people. You don't want to let everybody else down who stayed in that room. because you want to be part of that. It's subtle, it's not a difference, but it makes a massive impact.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, like, suddenly you've got that emotional pull on the fact that you'd be letting the team down. The team being a bunch of people who you have no clue who they are, you have no affinity or relationship with, but just that inserting that specificity. I think I've said that right.
That's definitely language that wins that, Rich.
Yeah, language that doesn't win. Oh, God, I knew I was stitching myself up there. But ultimately, just putting that extra few words, just achieve that additional outcome, really, really fascinating. And I know we've got another one as well, haven't we, Stu?
Yeah, I know time, so I'll run through this one quickly. But this second one, if you move the slides on there, Rich, is another trial that they've done. And they've got volunteers to try and cut in the line, or the queue, as us UK guys would call it, to use the photocopying machine. And they asked them to use different things when they were using the excuse to cut the line. The first thing was request only. So what they did, they would go up and say, excuse me, I've got 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine? Surprisingly, 60% of people agreed. And the truth is, if you're in line to use a copying machine and you're not making copies, what you're doing there? So you're just telling people they're going to use the machine to make copies. So it doesn't really matter what they said, but that obviously had a 60% result. So I guess as salespeople, we always say, ask for what you want and you might get it. And, 60% of people replied with that. But where it starts to get really interesting is when they give a reason. So the second example was, excuse me, I've got 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? And the difference was 94% of people let the researchers skip ahead in the line. 94 out of every 100 let them in. Massive, massive success just for giving a reason. Where it goes a little bit deeper, the reason doesn't actually matter. So they tried another example. They said, excuse me, I've got 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make copies? Well, of course you have to make copies. You're in the queue for the machine, or else what are you doing there? But that was 93%. So the reason doesn't really matter is what I'm saying. But whenever you have a request, give a reason for the request as well. And it's far more powerful and far more likely to be accepted.
Well, it's like over 50% uplift.
Massive,
if you give a reason, which I think that's really, really interesting now.
I think from my own experience, but putting this in a sales context, I mean, the staggering increase in success by just giving a reason why you're making a request is I started thinking about how I was almost doing this without me even thinking about it, where I gone from, can we set a time for a demo, please? And then changing that to say, can we set a time for a demo so that I can share with you how we've achieved similar results for similar people. And when I started just adding that reason in, exponentially my success rate of conversions went up. This is before I knew this study existed, but this study has backed up that when you give a reason, even if that reason maybe doesn't make the most sense, people still feel like they're inclined to accept something when there is a reason. Things feel more rational when there are reasons.
You can use it in everyday life as well. I've just used an example with my wife earlier. I was running onto this webinar and I said, Leanne, when you make us a coffee, please, I've just got to run onto this webinar. It works. If I just said, Leanne, make us a coffee, she'd have said, piss off. He is listening now, so that's the last coffee I'm getting.
So I think another example where you can use this is, let's all imagine you're at an exhibition stand. Someone comes up to you and they're going to go, what do you do? And most people feel they've just got to answer that. They've got to pitch. What we should be doing is making sure this is super relevant and just give that reason. So I can make that super relevant for you. Tell me, what do you do? And ask a couple of questions so you know exactly what to say back to them. I've never failed with that.
Jacob, if you're brave enough to try that in Tesco's, mate, I'd love to see the recordings. See if you can
is that in the
Tesco queue. Jacob's going to try the Tesco queue so it doesn't take him hours.
But you know that would work though. In a queue, if you give a reason, just people don't want to say no. People don't want to be unfair. People don't want to be that person. Obviously 6 out of 100 do. But
so, Mark, why don't we start to open up some examples of like how we actually use these now in real calls? So we're going to play some real examples on in this part.
Well, Rich, I was going to say to you, I feel like we've made that a number of times. It is 4:00 now, and I've got a number of cool example clips. Do we do this, or do we have this as a starting point for next week, a 2-parter, where we can play some real cool clips?
I'll tell you what. Let's play a tease. We've still got 124 people on. If people want to hear some real examples and calls, type yes, and we'll see what the audience wants. Carry on. Yes, please. Mark, listen to the people. Give the people what they want.
I'm desperate for the bathroom. Okay, all right. Okay, so first of all, Rich, why don't you take us to that? That was great language. So one thing I've done is I've spent some time in Refract looking at some calls, and what I wanted to do, I'm not going to wet myself, James. What I wanted to do is play some examples of winning words and phrases that you can use in your cold calls. So the first one we've got is, would it make sense? We've then got, would it be fair? Are you open-minded? My personal favourite of, would it be ridiculous? And which of these are you bumping into? And imagine if. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a couple of clips of where we've used that. So the first one is, would it make sense? So let me share my screen. And I'll need to unplug as well. So,
hey, everyone can see that and still hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So looking at is, would it make sense? This is where I'm going to play. Let me play this clip. I'll just play one. This is a colleague now, and she's made a cold call, and someone's sort of come back with a bit of an objection as to say, they're not really, they're not quite who we think they are, and they clarify. So Nia says, thanks for clarifying. What she wants to do now is tell them about Refract, but to do that, she softens that request by asking if it would just make sense, and I'll just play that here.
Thank you for clarifying. Would it make sense for me to tell you a little bit about how other sales training organisations are using our technology?
Sure. So just that, would it make sense? Just asking that question. I will play one more. Let's play John, boys. So John, another SDR here, he's actually asking, after they've had this conversation, that would it make sense to set up a brief 10-minute call here?
Yeah, would it make sense as well to see if we can set up, say, a brief 10-minute call? Or
again, just that phrase of would it make sense? It doesn't feel like it's such a big commitment. You are actually giving them permission. It lowers resistance as well, because you're asking them to make a judgment. Like, would this make sense based on everything that we've been discussing? My next one is similar. Is instead of would it make sense, is would it be fair? And the reason would it be fair works is because people don't like to be seen as unfair. Everyone wants to be fair. They want to have a fair crack of the whip, so to speak. Would it be fair is a great way in which you can start using this. This is not a prospecting call. This is a slightly different situation. So had an inbound demo request, and towards the end of the demo, they were saying to me, there's no next steps here, Mark. I'm going to get in touch with you when I want to. And very much he was telling me, the alpha male, that he had the power. But that left me really confused. I had no expectations. I had no idea where this sat on his priority list and when we could have that conversation next. So I just went back to him and said, like, look, if you were me, so again, I'm trying to get to him on a human emotional level, but when would it be fair for me to come back to you? Even though he's told me, it is absolutely on his terms. He will tell me when we're going to speak again. I'll play that now.
If you were me and I've not heard from you before X, when would it be fair to reach back out to you just to see how you're getting on?
If you haven't heard from me by the beginning of April, then reach out.
So just to put that in context, that was only 2.5 weeks away from that point. And he's now changed his whole stance. I've now got permission to reach back out to him based on what he said. I won't play another example of would it be fair, but why don't we move on to, this is my favorite of, would it be ridiculous? Now, this comes back to what I was saying earlier on. It's really hard for someone to say yes. It's really easy for someone to say no. And what you want to do is you want them to say no, but qualify themselves in. So this is where you can talk about potential challenges they may have. So if we think back to some of the pitches we were listening to earlier on, they both led with a couple of problems. I feel like a missing question there would it be ridiculous to suggest that you have these problems? It's so easy to say, no, it does resonate with me. let me just play a couple of moments of where that has been asked.
I was just curious, would it be ridiculous to say that that's the same for you?
I'm just curious, almost giving a reason. Would it be ridiculous to say that's the same for you? They come back and say, well, no, it wouldn't be ridiculous. And they then go to qualify themselves back in, start to give you information that you might not have gathered. And then we've got another one here as well that I'll just play, which is similar.
But I'm just curious to see if this is a problem that you've had. I can imagine it's not too ridiculous to assume that this might be something that you guys are looking to improve on.
No, I have to admit.
No, I have to admit. He then goes on, it wouldn't be too ridiculous to assume that these are problems that you're running into. If Mike is still on the line, I know Sandler used the word ridiculous a lot. Would it be ridiculous to suggest? So that's another one there. I'll move on. I was going to share with you bumping into, but I can just talk to you about that. This is when you're talking about a couple of challenges and you just ask someone, curious, what are those challenges are you bumping into? It's a nice way to just position that you're probably going to be nudging into these challenges. Bumping into is a great way just to get someone to subtly commit to problems.
Yeah, it's a really softer ask than saying, are you suffering from these? If you ask someone a question like that, or do you face these challenges? It feels like a very strong commitment for someone to say yes. Bumping into just feels, more like, yeah, I come across them. It's something that I'm familiar with. It's a much lower ask, and so when you ask lower asks, you get much more positive responses from prospects.
Absolutely. And Rich, while you've got the mic, the last one that I'm going to play some recordings on is a phrase I know we'll use at Refract, and that's the phrase imagine. Rich, I know that you've written a few articles on this before. Why don't you tell us about why you feel this phrase is so powerful, and I'll play out some clips.
Yeah, I think like anything, people, in order to really visualize a better place than they're in today, the word imagine it's almost like an instruction. Instruction starts to get them to almost close their eyes and think about being in that better situation. So we use this a lot by saying, imagine if you could, or imagine if you were able to do this. People start to visualize themselves almost using your product or achieving that objective. They're making it real in their world. It's just a very visual, powerful word to use to start to say, imagine if you could do this, or imagine if the situation arose where. Get people to start to think more and put it in their world, because when they put it in their world, it's more relatable. It's kind of the same effect as when when you watch a comedy sketch and they tell a joke and you kind of really relate to it, because it's kind of reminds you of like a family member or something that you do in normal life, and it's the kind of same sort of effect that we're having here.
Well, and you hear that phrase when someone's laughing, and I could just imagine you doing that, because it's so easy to start picturing it and it brings it to life. Let me play a couple of clips. So, Rich, this is you using that phrase, imagine if, when what you're trying to do is to get this gentleman to imagine what might be possible if they were using Refract. So let me play it from here.
We provide a solution to that problem where let's imagine if you could be alerted to every single time one of your competitors was being mentioned on the call, or every time a specific objection was coming up in a conversation.
Really powerful, because you're not telling him what's going to happen. He's thinking it. He's starting to imagine, so this is what's going to happen. And as people are saying in the chat, it really starts to have that impact on people. And Stu, not so you're left out, you've done this as well in this school here that I dug out. So you used it twice in pretty quick succession. So this is where you're starting to talk about a new hire joins the sales team. And what about if you could help them with Refract, but you, again, rather than tell them, you use the phrase imagine and get them to think about it.
Absolutely. So if you imagine, your new starters when they join, let's say you hire 2 or 3 new starters, what you've done in the past, which is absolutely fine, and what everybody does is you listen and
start there, and then I'll play down here.
Your new starters come in now. Imagine if you could just show them a library of snippets of what it looks like, so they can see best practice examples.
Did it come through? I could hear it, where you could hear in the background, yeah, perfect. Like, he was just constantly confirming to you that I can picture this. And that's when you know you've got someone in a really powerful place, because it then starts to become difficult. You know, as Mike said, people buy with emotion, and he's starting to emotionally imagine using this and that impact. And it starts to become difficult to pull away from that. That was my bit of the week. Those were some words and languages and techniques that you can start using in your sales conversations. I'd love to hear how people get on using some of those words and phrases in their cold calls.
Awesome. So that kind of brings us to the end today. Hopefully people found a lot of value in the session. What we'd like to do is, just before people go, is just put in the chat anything that they would like us to focus on in future episodes. And we've got a thing there on social selling, so there's definitely a lot more we can do on that. But yeah, please put in any requests. Hopefully it's all been really valuable today. If you want to find out more about how Refract can help, we don't promote our product on these webinars. That's not the objective. But if you want to find out more about what we are doing to help companies improve the conversations, the words and phrases that they're using, check out our website. We've also got some new resources on there as well, which could be really helpful. Resources around helping sales teams win in a remote downturn, which people might find of value, as well as things around coaching inside sales teams. So thank you so much for joining. It's been great to have you on, and we look forward to seeing you on future weeks.
Absolutely. Connect with us on LinkedIn as well, guys. We'll put our LinkedIn links in the chat. I think, Matt, you've got a quick grab of that. One of the things that we absolutely love and never get tired of hearing is people telling us when they're trying these techniques out, how it's working for them as well. So connect with us, give us a shout out, let us know how you're getting on. But we'll see you all soon.